This is the In Focus podcast from The Hindu.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the In Focus podcast. I'm your host G. Sampath. 4 days after N Biren Singh resigned as Chief Minister of Manipur, President's rule has been imposed in the state. Singh's resignation is seen as a belated one by many. Since May 2023, when violence flared up, more than 250 people have been killed and 60,000 displaced and are unable to return to their homes. There has also been a huge proliferation of armed groups running amok in the state. Given Biren Singh's abject failure in the past 21 months to quell the violence, what took him so long to resign? Will President's rule bring back normalcy in the state? And what options can the government explore to restore trust among the divided communities and restore peace? We discuss all these questions and more in this episode of In Focus. And we have with us Pradeep Fanjubam, editor with the Impal Review of Arts and Politics. Pradeep, welcome to In Focus. To start off this podcast, I want to ask you what are your preliminary thoughts on the factors that led to Biren Singh's resignation now? He's been there for 21 months, when there has been so much of bloodshed, but his resignation has come after all this time. What do you think led to this move?
I think, there's been a lot of pressure on him from different quarters to resign, and some actually asking him to stay on. And that friction was there all the while. But I think the BJP wanted to keep him for some reason or the other, wanted to keep him, which is why he has survived for so long. But towards the last few months, there's been lots of dissident activities within the BJP state BJP itself. And and also the assembly session, the winter session was missed, and now the budget session is coming up, and this was approaching, and this dissidence within
this assembly session, if this assembly session was not going to happen, for more than 180 days, it's supposed to go into suspended animation, right?
Yes.
What is the implication of that? So this sitting hasn't happened. It's more than 180 days. Like, what is the implication of that? Would it have any material consequences?
I think the period has lapsed, and I don't know why this is being allowed. And also people are actually wondering whether anything is done here. It's in the fringe. It's out of sight of so many people. The mainstream newspapers and news media, and also the mainstream consciousness. So anything can happen. That kind of a feeling is there very much, that this was not supposed to be allowed, and if it has lapsed, then this is a constitutional crisis, and this crisis is being allowed. And also people are recalling that this has been happening all the while. People were not sure if the Article 355 was in promulgation was promulgated here, because more or less the law and order situation here, it's an ambiguous situation where you have so many central forces rushed in here. And then also the command changed. There's a unified command because you have so many different forces, CRPF to police to army. You have to have a central command. So they have a unified command here. And normally it's the chief minister who's supposed to be at the chair of this unified command. But this was also changed, and there was a security advisor brought in. So many things happen which were not easily explained by the Constitution. In the Constitution, if you have Article 355, then this is allowed, that the center can take over the law and order situation in a state which is in grim trouble of breakdown financially or in terms of law and order. But we thought that was happening. But now it has been clarified the Article 355 is not in promulgation here. And then the law and order was still in charge of the state. So that ambiguity was always there. And now that ambiguity has multiplied. You have a clear-cut violation, not violation, but lapse of the Constitution. So we are in a constitutional vacuum at the moment. Article 174 says 6 months, and that 6 months have already lapsed, and nothing is being done. So I suppose there's no explanation other than that this is being allowed. and because nobody sees it or nobody cares or whatever. But that something I mean, a constitutional mandate has been actually allowed to lapse, and I think this should be treated as an emergency.
Right, treated as an emergency. Coming back to the Biren Singh resignation, Pradeep, do you think, when you said a lot of factors were at play, the BJP had wanted him to continue all this while, but now the pressure was building up. Now, speaking of pressure building up, do you think the Supreme Court ordering a forensic analysis of his audio tapes might have played a role in sort of catalyzing this resignation?
Yeah, that would be one factor, but the immediate factor was the dissidents within. There were lots of dissidents who were rushing to Delhi asking for a change of leadership because this thing has been allowed for a long time. This trouble has been allowed for a long time without the state taking charge. And this was the movement, and the assembly was supposed to begin on the 10th of this month, but that was declared null and void by the governor. And I think because the Congress, though they have only five MLAs, were going to move a no confidence motion, and it was quite likely that the BJP House may crumble because the dissidents may decide to vote against the continuation of this government, and then the BJP here could have broken down. And I think that is one of the reasons why the final decision was taken to have Biren Singh resign, and also to actually declare the assembly summon null and void. So, but the only thing is that if this had happened about a month ago, then they would have been time for them to adjust. But now this happened at the last minute, and the assembly, you can't just do it immediately. I don't know what they're going to do because this is something unprecedented. And but the fact is, the time has lapsed. The constitutional mandate of 6 months is already crossed. So it's already 2 days into, or 3 days, 3 days into that vacuum. And that is, I don't know if this vacuum is going to be allowed to continue. And moreover, the assembly session was supposed to be the budget session. And without a budget, you can't run a state. So I don't know what's going to be done. Maybe Article 357, where the parliament is allowed to actually pass the budget of the state in case of president's rule. So something will have to be done.
So you think so you think that the next step is most likely to be president's rule in Manipur?
I think that I cannot see any other way unless they are able to reinstall the government and quickly hold the assembly in. Otherwise, I think that will have to be the next resort. And probably they will not think of dissolving the assembly because this is a BJP majority state. If you dissolve the assembly, then there'll have to be another election, and maybe the BJP won't come back here. So I think probably it's going to be that suspended animation where you give time to the legislatures to actually reorganize themselves and come up with a viable kind of a combination where you can form the government again so that they can revive the BJP government again.
Right, but it does seem like, I think the Prime Minister is out of the country, so that may perhaps be a reason for the delay in the President's rule being announced. Now, coming to the actual situation on the ground, Pradeep, in Manipur, has been trying to move away from insurgency for a very long time. But in the past 21 months, this trajectory seems to have been completely reversed. It's become heavily militarized, lots of proliferation of armed groups. So, can you talk a little bit about how serious is this remilitarization? What is the extent of this remilitarization on the ground in Manipur now, and how serious is it?
I think it is quite serious in the sense that before this trouble broke out, the insurgents were very much there, but then they were having a difficult time recruiting people. I think that they had lost that fire, and they were on the back foot. But and probably the why this trouble has been allowed to continue is to actually bring them into the picture. The insurgents who are hiding, Meitei insurgents, Valley insurgents who are hiding in who have a stronghold in Myanmar, to come back and join the fight so that they can be rounded up and then forced to come to some kind of terms of peace. But that didn't work. The people there are still remaining. Some of them may have come back because their villages are affected and all that, but not all. The major bulk of the insurgents are still there. And the plan of bringing them back has actually backfired. There is a new surge of anger, and that has actually helped them recruit more. So I think it has actually gone the other way, in the way that was just the opposite of what was planned.
Right. And I mean, if we assume that president's rule is imposed, and there has to be then a clear plan from the union government to sort of get these armed groups to demilitarize. I mean, and that would mean, of course, getting all the sides to the negotiating table, which is not going to be easy. How do you think, the state can go about undoing the kind of damage which has happened to the social fabric in Manipur over these past 21 months? The loss of trust between different communities, between the communities and the state, communities and state agencies. How do you get these people to the negotiating table and start the process of, demilitarization? Do you have like any particular kinds of mechanism that you think of?
Yeah, I think first of all, we have to make a distinction between people who armed themselves after this trouble. When that was an immediate reaction to the problem, the looting of the armories and all that, and also on both sides, the building up of what they call the village volunteer forces, that you are there, you're called upon to actually defend your village and that kind of thing. That has also caused a different kind of militarization. And the other stream is something different, which
So
has
what
been
do you mean by
happening.
different kind of militarization? How is it a different kind of militarization?
Different in the sense that one is the old militancy, which is about secessionism, the assertion of the old independence of Manipur, or in the case of the Nagas, the Naga independence. That's another stream of discontent, which has to be tackled differently because we confuse it with the immediate problem. Immediate problem is about this present trouble. You come up and then you fight each other. It's more of a civil war. The other one is a war against the state. This one is more of a civil war. So these two have to be tackled differently. And this is where the initial mistake was made, that the trouble here was thought to be something which can attract the other the insurgents. I would say one just for clarity, one set are the insurgents, the other set are the people who actually are fighting that civil war, where
You
people
mean
are.
like Aramboy, Tengol kind of
Yeah,
war?
Arambai Tangle is one of them, but they are not the only one. There are so many other small groups which are coming out, which have come up. They are a big group. Arambai Tangle, of course, is a more organized kind of a group. They have a cultural organization, and after this thing came up, they also armed and joined the fight and all that. But they are one of the most formidable amongst these village, the new volunteers. But you cannot equate them with those insurgents. They are on a different agenda altogether. So you have to tackle them differently, and these people have to be tackled differently. And which is why, and this is happening on both sides. Both sides, there would be insurgents who are actually armed much before this trouble began, and there would be people who joined this to because of the explosion of ethnic violence, and they were joining that ethnic violence, not any insurgency. But what is happening is that line between the insurgents and the village volunteers, I would just continue to call them, is beginning to blur because some of the village volunteers are actually joining the ranks of the insurgents. That's what where the trouble is. But still, when we tackle this problem, we have to make this distinction because you apply, one formula for both this trouble, it can actually complicate the situation more. Maybe it will accentuate the problem, the insurgency problem as such. Now, the village volunteer thing, if this ethnic problem is over, they will subside, but the insurgency will remain. That's a longer term. They've been fighting for so many decades, and that will have to be tackled on a different scale.
Right. I mean, I appreciate the distinction you made, Pradeep, about the two different kinds of strife which has been going on. On the one hand, of course, you had these insurgents who have been there for a longer time, and then these village volunteers who are like recently, armed extremely highly, and then they have a complete sort of a different agenda, which is more of a civil war kind of a situation. I think you're right to say that they need somewhat different strategic approaches from the state. Now, going on to the community level, if you look at the police, I mean, the police is divided, as is quite evident, along ethnic lines. So there hasn't been much progress in bringing the perpetrators of violent crimes of the last 21 months to justice. There have been hardly any convictions, and the Commission of Inquiry has also not filed its report yet. So, how can the people, there are like 60,000 people who have been displaced. How do they get a sense of justice without, unless you have the process of justice going forward, and which could only then cause some kind of a trust to be built back between different communities. When the police itself is divided along ethnic lines, how do we bring about justice in the state as part of the peace process?
Yeah, that is one of the most unfortunate things that has happened, the police getting divided. They have become more or less, as you said, standing on different sides of the conflict. Otherwise, once upon a time, they were united by the uniform. The value of that uniform is gone. It's more colored by the ethnicity and all that. That thing has happened. This will be a much longer and also much more difficult reconciliation, or maybe easier because they are all government employees. And recently there were more recruits raised, and their training was not held in Imphal because of the trouble that was held in Assam. And there, apparently, the new recruits pledged that they would be together and all that. So I think that kind of thing has to build up as for the police. But the divisions, as well as the displaced people, they are in miserable condition on both sides. And I have not been able to go to the other side because I belong to this community, the Metis community. But I have been visiting the relief camps here, and they are not doing very well. And in fact, many of them crave for some kind of livelihood because they had a livelihood, and now they are out of that place, out of their environment, and they can't just begin another livelihood easily. Those kind of things are there. I think they will have to be resettled, and if the trouble subsides, then probably the best thing would be to have them settle wherever they were before the trouble broke out. But if this trouble is going to carry on for some more years or some more months, then I think they have to have some kind of uh, temporary kind of settlement, and also, but it's not so easy because you give them settlement, but that is not going to guarantee them a future. That when I speak to them, that's always what they come up with. What do they do? What about their children? They had plans, and those plans have been broken. They have to start from scratch again. Those are the things, and in fact, suicidal tendency is actually building in the relief camps, and in fact, there have been a number of suicides as well as suicide attempts and all that. So these kind of mental illnesses are coming in, and it'll have to be tackled more sensitively and more urgently. Otherwise, it's going to get only worse. And also, when you have so many people who are directly affected like that, it's difficult to talk to them about reconciliation. They may say they may resign, but it's not going to be a positive kind of a reconciliation. If they do it out of helplessness, but not out of any sense of goodwill that the reconciliation has come about, and that would be a very negative kind of a piece, that you are still not liking each other, but you're doing it because of compulsion. The positive thing, as this conflict scholar Johan Galtung says, is for them to actually realize and also find the humanity in each other, and then reconcile on those bases, not on the basis of helplessness. And I think if the state doesn't do anything, even if a reconciliation comes about, it'll be a negative kind of thing. They are helpless. This is the best way forward. No other way. That kind of thing. We are doing it out of compulsion, and that is not going to be very healthy in the long run. That bitterness is going to remain. The ideal situation is for that to cure all of them, everybody, of that bitterness first, or maybe slowly. But the moot point is you have to cure that bitterness, and then the peace that comes about will be much more permanent and also much more positive.
Right. I mean, very wise words there, Pradeep. Thank you for that. I mean, of course, you spoke about the suicidal tendencies among people in the relief camp, their worries about their children's future, and of course, what kind of reconciliation is on the cards. That's a big question mark, and how the state would approach it. Now, speaking of the state's approach, I mean, we don't have much to go by except what's in the public domain, and one of the documents which is visible is Biren Singh's resignation letter, in which he has not, I don't know, the relief camps and humanitarian tragedy which has been there for everybody to see, that is there. But this letter talks about fighting further on these twin issues of what he calls narco terrorism and illegal immigrants. I don't know if these two issues should get the kind of priority, and if they do, to how they will sit in with this imperative for reconciliation and peace. So, what are your thoughts on these two issues? I mean, how serious are they? Narco terrorism and illegal immigrants are what he has flagged in his resignation letter.
Yeah, he has flagged those issues, but probably also to let people believe that he was doing it for a purpose and all that, and maybe he was, whether rightly or wrongly. And of course, I would agree that these are also big issues. You have the question of the expansion of poppy cultivation. Those are issues, but they should have been tackled more sensitively and in a more legal way, not just legal way, but not without any fanfare. You're doing it out of but just keeping the law as a law keeping kind of an approach, not just doing it, as I said, with lots of fanfare and a sense of triumph, which was actually demonizing a certain community and also getting them very hurt. That actually added to this conflict. But the issues actually are real. The thing about poppy cultivation, the Marsac came out this year, I haven't seen, but last year's came out that the poppy cultivation has actually declined a bit after the trouble, but it's still large enough. They are still about
But the decline
11.
could be as a result of the civil strife, right? Everything has declined, I mean, all kinds of businesses.
Yeah. Even the economy has actually plummeted there. Yeah, so that could be it. But the thing is very much there. So that has to be also controlled. But as I said, without that triumphalism and political rhetoric, just do it as a need of the law. That you cannot allow this, but also make sure that the people who are doing it, many of them are not criminals. They're just farmers. They've been given a crop. They're doing it. So get them to alternate paths to livelihoods. And of course, that will be a little difficult because the returns are much bigger in this crop. But still, it has to be a combine of that carrot and stick. Now, you have the carrot, but if you still cross a line, then the stick will come down. That kind of thing has to be done. That the state has to exercise that. No, to just recall another very interesting and also timeless kind of saying from Niccolo Machiavelli, that the state, the prince, has to win the love as well as the fear of its people. And if you can't keep both, that you can't let go of that fear. You can dispense with that love for some time, but the fear is not about terrorizing. It's about the fear of the law. That you do something wrong, the law will come down on you. If you terrorize, then there's going to be also retaliation. That kind of thing, I think we have to keep in mind. But it is important that you make sure that the law cannot be dispensed, and after that has been assured, then you establish that camaraderie and love, and also that relationship which should be there between humans.
Right, fear of the law for sure, but also a law that is seen as fair and equally applied across the board and not seen as, discriminatory.
Not something which is discriminatory, something which is applied because the law is broken. The law is there. I mean, it's a universal kind of thing.
Right. One last question, Pradeep, before I let you go. So, I mean, I'm assuming president's rule is going to be imposed because the other possibilities seem less likely. Now, assuming the union government sort of comes into the picture as the main force here in the state in the immediate future, what do you think are the three, in your assessment, the three immediate priorities or steps that need to be taken to put Manipur on a track towards peace and normalcy?
I think I have been also involved in some back channel talks and all that. And I find that the fighting parties, both the communities, actually want peace. And also, there's not much, I mean, it's almost like all reunion in those meetings, maybe the wrong choice of people and all that. The radicals are not brought in. But even then, there are so many voices which are not heard, which don't come out of the fore, because when you have the doves and the hawks together, you hear only the hawks, and the doves actually recede into the background. And also after some time, even the doves begin to talk the hawk language without actually believing it. So if we identify that and give voices to those to the doves, then I think the problem will mitigate by itself. And that is where it should be. You of course, first you make sure that there is no reward for violence. You indulge in violence, you only suffer. You suffer casualties, or you inflict casualties, nothing more. There's no reward at the end of violence. That kind of message sent out strongly. And then after that, if you are looking for rewards, that can only come through peaceful means. And you negotiate, see what can be conceded, what cannot be, and then bring the settlement. The minute you give the impression that violence is going to bring some kind of reward, then the violence will continue. I think that kind of message is sent out strongly to all parties, that violence is not going to get you anything. It can only get you more violence and more suffering. But if you want settlement, then let's do it peacefully. That kind of message should be sent out strongly and also with a firmness. Then I think some kind of understanding will come about. And I'm not just saying this. There's another. I've been reading quite a bit on this conflict thing. Paul Collier's 2003 report, where he was actually saying what I just said. That reward is what keeps that expectation of reward is what keeps violence going. You just send a strong message. There's never going to be any reward for violence. That you have, if some of the demands that you're making are reasonable, then let's come on the table and decide what can be. And also what you demand and or what you object will have to be assessed on the basis that there are so many stakeholders, not just you, but what you get may hurt somebody else, or what you didn't get may also affect somebody else. I mean, in Manipur situation, you have so many communities. The two communities are fighting, but there are other communities as well. So you just can't get everything on the basis of what either of the fighters want. So that kind of message should be sent out strongly. And in fact, Collier's report is conflict as market. That you're actually bargaining for something, and that bargain, if it is blunted, there's no bargain at all. Just come to senses and settle the problem. Then I think some kind of light will begin to be seen at in this darkness.
Right. I mean, of course, that's a very good point to make, Pradeep. Thank you for that. I mean, you did mention one very positive thing, which is that there is a desire for peace on both sides, on every side, in fact, and there are doves and hawks on both sides. And sometimes when the hawks take over, the doves also pretend to be hawks. And of course, there should be some kind of a distinction, a discernment from the government to sort of encourage the doves on both sides and send the message, as you said correctly, that there has to be a very clear message that there is no reward for violence. And once that message goes through with absolute clarity, I think there is a chance for some kind of a settlement to come about. Thank you so much, Pradeep, for taking the time out, joining this conversation, sharing your very, very insightful points and observations. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sampath.
In Focus will be back soon with analysis of the biggest news issues. In the meantime, you can find our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and other platforms. Just search for In Focus by The Hindu. We'll see you soon.